Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers the right to film, easements, and stop and identify laws, and is brought to us by Stray Dog the Exposer's channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. Before we dive into the interaction, I want to give a big thanks to the sponsor of this episode, Upside. If you've bought groceries or any other essentials in the last couple of years, then I'm sure you've noticed that the price of everyday necessities keeps getting higher and higher. The other day I was grocery shopping with my family, and I couldn't believe how expensive a week's worth of groceries has gotten. But I recently found out that I could be earning cash back on all those everyday expenses thanks to Upside. Upside is an app that lets you earn cash back on everyday purchases you already make, like gas and food. And yes, it's real cash back. No confusing rewards or points, just actual money you can transfer straight to your bank account. Upside is super easy to use. All you have to do is claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside and then pay with a credit or debit card. I use Upside every time I fill up at my local Shell station, but there are over 85,000 gas stations, grocery stores, and restaurants on the Upside app, so you can use it almost anywhere you go. Over $1 million in cash back is being earned by Upside users each week, and top Upside earners are making as much as $300 a month. To find out how much you can earn, click the link in the description to download Upside and use my promo code auditheaudit to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon of your first tank of gas. That offer is only available to people who use my code, so click the link in the description or scan the QR code here to download Upside and use code auditheaudit to start earning today. Thanks again to Upside for sponsoring today's episode. On September 11th, 2018, independent journalist Albert Bustillos went to the Navajo oil refinery in Artesia, New Mexico to film content for a story. While Mr. Bustillos was filming the exterior of the refinery from across the street, a security guard approached him, and Mr. Bustillos live-streamed the encounter that followed on his YouTube channel.
Are you taking pictures of the refinery?
Just doing a story.
Oh, they told me that you ain't supposed to take no videos or pictures.
Yeah, I can't go on your property and take pictures. I'm on public property. Yeah, I can take a picture of anything I can see from public.
What kind of story you make? Is this with the newspaper or?
It just depends on who wants to pick it up. I come out and get some B-roll footage, cars coming in and out. I might ask some questions if somebody wants to answer them, and then I gather my content and then I put it up for whoever wants it. Sometimes I have specific interest in mind when I go to a place. Other times it's just for general knowledge and B-roll footage. Yeah, if I can see it for public, man, I can record it. Can't trespass the eyes, I'm not gonna go on your property.
I know that it's noticeable for people, but I don't know. Our safety guys made us. If you see anybody filming, you have to come and.
Well, you can come and talk to me. That's fine.
Yeah.
Just let them know that I'm not doing nothing illegal. I have every right.
Filming, taking pictures. I can't. Stop that.
Yeah. That's all it is, man. No ill intent. I'm just here to take pictures. Is all. You see the street lights and see the fire hydrants and all that. Okay, Navajo Refinery didn't put those in. The city did. So everything on this side of those utility markers is public property. There's an easement. You know what I mean? Public easement. And I won't cross the line or nothing. I'm stay out here.
You can't be taking pictures with mine. They got signs up.
Yeah, I can, man. I'm just not gonna go on your property and take pictures. I'm on public property right now, so I can take pictures of anything I can see.
Mine's actually protected by DHS.
DHS memo 2010 revised in 2017 says we can film any government agency or whatever from public point, anywhere the public's permitted to go, we can take pictures from. Can't trespass my eyes, If it's viewable from the public, I can take pictures.
In defending his right to film the exterior of the refinery, Mr. Bustillos refers to a Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, memo from 2010 that establishes that filming federal property from public property is permitted. In October of 2010, the Federal Protective Service, which is part of DHS, released an information bulletin addressing, quote, the public's right to photograph the exterior of federal facilities. The bulletin clarified that the Code of Federal Regulations, now quoting, does not not prohibit photography by individuals of the exterior of federally owned or leased facilities from publicly accessible spaces, such as streets, sidewalks, parks, and plazas. In response to, quote, an increase in the public's interest in photographing and videotaping both exterior and interior of federal facilities, to include individuals expressing their First Amendment protected rights by intentionally photographing and videotaping the exterior and interior of a federal facility, and law enforcement in the course of their duties to test law enforcement, the Federal Protective Service issued an operational readiness order in 2018 that reiterated the 2010 guidance, clarifying that, quote, photography and videotaping, absent a criminal predicate, is a First Amendment protected activity, and directed law enforcement personnel to maintain security without adversely impacting the public's rights relating to photography and videotaping. However, it is important to note that these documents only apply to federal facilities, and although Title II of the Homeland Security Act of 2002 requires DHS to develop a comprehensive plan for securing quote-unquote critical infrastructure, such as oil refineries, the Navajo Oil Refinery is privately owned property and not a federal facility. Nonetheless, the principles regarding the right to film the exterior of a property from publicly accessible areas discussed in the DHS memos are applicable to private property as well. As the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which has jurisdiction over New Mexico, explained in the 2022 case of Irizarry versus Yahia, the act of making an audio or audiovisual recording is a type of quote-unquote speech creation that is necessarily included within the scope of the First Amendment. As such, it is highly likely that a court would conclude that Mr. Bustillos' filming was protected by the First Amendment.
All right? I'm not going to go on your property because then I become subject to your policies. You understand? Policies ain't law. Those apply to everybody within the compound. I'm outside here. I'm just a free civilian. As long as we're out here, man, we're good. Google Earth came by, man, took pictures of all this. You can get on Google Maps and you can see inside the refinery. You know what I mean? Yeah. No, that's cool. You guys come and talk to me. All right, I'm just going to take a walk down here.
Yeah, just make sure you don't step on it.
I'm not going to get on here. See that? I was telling him, see the fire hydrant? And they go all the way down and the public lights? All that was put in by the city, not by Navajo. That's the public easement. So as long as I don't go on that side of those, I'm good. Because, like I was telling him, the properties, nobody's property goes all the way to the street. There's a public easement everywhere you go. And that's where we're allowed to be. There's a sidewalk goes all the way down to the other end, and it goes on. It's all public property, bro. So I'm not going to cross y'all's line. All right?
Thank you.
Cool, man. Y'all have a good one. See you guys.
Mr. Bustillos argues that the fact that the city installed fire hydrants and lights means that part of the property is a so-called public easement, which is a common argument in the auditor community. An easement is defined as the legal right to use someone else's land for a specified purpose. As such, when the government wants to place structures such as fire hydrants, street lights, and utility poles on privately owned property, it must obtain an easement in order to do so. However, not all easements are public, and the fact that the government has placed utility structures on a certain part of private property does not necessarily mean that area is open to the public. It all depends on the nature of the easement. For example, in some instances, a government may obtain a so-called utility easement that permits it to place utility structures on private property. This type of easement does not open the property to the public, or even confer a general right of access to the government. It simply authorizes the government to build and maintain the utility structures. On the other hand, easements for sidewalks through private property typically create a public right-of-way that allows for pedestrian access to the sidewalk, and in some areas, roads and sidewalks are owned by the government, with private property lines ending before the public right-of-ways. Now, because of the different ways that property lines can be drawn, and the various types of easements that may exist, the location of utility structures alone generally cannot be used to determine whether property is public or private. However, it should be mentioned that a court later determined that Mr. Bustillos did in fact remain on public property the entire time he was filming, so it does seem that he correctly understood where the property lines were in this situation. After ending his conversation with the security guards, Mr. Bustillos continued to walk around the perimeter of the refinery and film from public property. While he did so, a refinery security guard called 911 and reported a suspicious person on the outside of the fence filming in towards the refinery. Corporal Marcy Sanchez of the Artesia Police Department responded to the call, approached Mr. Bustillos, and began to question him.
Hi. Can I get your name and badge number that you're making contact? Sanchez?
I'm with the Artesia Police Department.
Your badge number or ID number?
Unit 725.
All right, thank you.
What can I help you with out here?
I don't need no help. I'm just doing a story, and I've been on public easement the whole time. Never crossed onto their property.
Okay.
So.
Well, can I see your ID?
No, ma'am.
I need your ID.
I haven't broke the law.
Called.
It don't matter.
I need to identify
you can put good citizen on.
I'm not going to put good
Well, you're not going to put my name because I'm not giving it to you. I have to have broken the law before I have to turn over all that information.
Okay.
If you articulate,
I was called.
that's fine.
Here.
You can be called. You can investigate, but I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to surrender my rights just because you showed up. I have to. You're asking for my ID. That would be surrendering my fourth.
Well, you identified me, so I'd like.
Well,
to
you're a public
identify you.
servant.
Exactly.
There's a difference. I'm not. I'm a free citizen.
So what is it that you're doing out here exactly?
What does it look like? I'm filming. That's it.
Navajo specifically.
Navajo. I am not working for Navajo. I'm not on their property. That is the only time that their rules apply.
All over their property.
It don't matter. What yes, on their property. There's no penal code at the bottom, meaning it's not a law, it is their policy. Their policies don't apply to me. Only if I'm on their property, then I become subject to their laws and their policies. While I'm on public property, I'm a free citizen. I can record anything that my eyes can see. Can't trespass my eyes. And this DHS memo sent out in 2010 to all the installations and revised in 2017 that we have permission to record police, any government officials in the course of their duty. It doesn't matter. If I can see it, see how I can see it from my eyes, I can't get in trouble for that. If they want, they can build a 30-foot wall and then I can't see it. But until then, I'm allowed to video anything.
What kind of movie are you making, your documentary?
I'm gathering content for matters of interest to the public. That's all it is. I'm not going on the property. I know my boundaries. I do this for a living. I know the law. I might not know all the laws, but I know these laws specifically.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter.
Well, I'm just curious.
Well, this is one thing. You know,
making documentaries.
I do a lot of stuff with this. It just depends what I feel like and who's gonna pick it up, who's gonna buy it, or if I'm just gonna post it or whatever. I don't work for nobody specifically. I'm an independent journalist gathering content for a story. Is all. That's all I'm doing. I've never. You know, I have to be committing a crime to give ID.
No, sir.
Yes, I do.
No, sir.
Yes, I do. Want to bet?
Yes, sir.
You have to articulate a crime that I've either committed, I'm committing, or I'm about to commit.
Yes, sir.
You want to bet?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, you better call your supervisor if you do something stupid.
Okay.
Call your supervisor. I don't matter. You can call. You can come and you can come investigate.
You are the suspect.
And?
You're calling here to deal with. Therefore, you are required.
No, I'm not. Suspicion isn't a crime.
Corporal David Bailey of the Artesia Police Department arrives on the scene and argues that Mr. Bustillos is legally required to identify himself because he is the suspect the officers were called to investigate. Section 30-22-3 of the New Mexico statutes defines the petty misdemeanor offense of concealing identity, which consists of, quote, concealing one's true name or identity or disguising oneself with intent to obstruct the due execution of the law, or with intent to intimidate, hinder, or interrupt any public officer in a legal performance of his duty. However, as we have discussed many times before here on ATA, the Supreme Court held in the 1979 case of Brown versus Texas that the Fourth Amendment does not permit a citizen to be punished for refusing to identify themselves to an officer who does not have reasonable suspicion to believe that an individual is engaged in criminal activity. Accordingly, in the 2008 case of Keelan versus City of Albuquerque, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals held that, quote, to arrest for concealing identity, there must be reasonable suspicion of some predicate underlying crime. As Corporal Bailey had no reasonable basis to believe that Mr. Bustillos had committed any sort of crime by filming from public property, it is likely that a court would conclude that Mr. Bustillos was not legally obligated to identify himself, and therefore that Corporal Bailey violated the Fourth Amendment by arresting him for concealing identity without the probable cause that is constitutionally required to do so.
Suspicion isn't a crime. It's not a felony or a misdemeanor. Yes, it is. Yes, it does. You have to articulate a crime I've committed, a crime I am committing, or no, I'm not. No. That can't be the first crime unless I've committed one. Then you can get me for failure.
No, sir.
Until then, just for me walking on the sidewalk is not permissible for me to give you ID.
Okay.
I don't have to give nothing unless I've committed a crime. You better go back and read up the law. I can film all I want. Look, all of it. Everything. It don't matter if it's posted. That's not the law. Do you see a penal code under the sign? No. If it was a law, there would be a penal code. I'm not on their property. Those laws, those rules don't apply to me unless I'm on their property. I'm on public access. That means I'm a free citizen. It does matter. You're ignorant if you don't know the law. You got that badge and that gun, but you don't even know. How are you going to enforce something when you don't even know? I'm not giving you my ID.
All right. Turn around.
Push
All
it
right.
front to back.
Here we go, guys. Put this here so I can.
Lead gentle, I'm not resisting. You want to identify himself? He's going to go to jail for concealing ID.
After his arrest, Mr. Bustillos was charged with concealing identity. A magistrate found him guilty of the offense, but Mr. Bustillos appealed, and on April 9, 2020, a judge determined that Mr. Bustillos was not guilty of concealing identity or any other crime. On September 11, 2020, Mr. Bustillos filed a lawsuit against Corporal Bailey and the city of Artesia, alleging violations of his First and Fourth Amendment rights and New Mexico law. Although the lawsuit was initially filed in state court, the case was removed to federal court, and on March 17, 2022, the district court judge denied Corporal Bailey qualified immunity for his actions in arresting Mr. Bustillos. Corporal Bailey and Artesia filed an interlocutory appeal of the qualified immunity decision, and on April 17, 2024, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the district court's order, determining that Corporal Bailey was not entitled to qualified immunity. In reaching this conclusion, the court held that Corporal Bailey did not have the reasonable suspicion necessary to identify Mr. Bustillos, rejecting Corporal Bailey's argument that it was reasonable to suspect Mr. Bustillos of trespassing, committing disorderly conduct, engaging in potential terrorist activity, and loitering. Notably, the decision states that, quote, Corporal Bailey identified these particular offenses after Mr. Bustillos' arrest, while preparing for trial. Based on Corporal Bailey's deposition testimony, at the time Corporal Bailey arrested Mr. Bustillos, his understanding of the law for concealing identification is that if he was dispatched to a call for service, he was within his rights to demand identification. But through his research, Corporal Bailey explained he learned he had to have reasonable suspicion of a predicate crime to support an arrest for failing to produce identification. At that point, Corporal Bailey identified crimes he believed were predicate offenses supporting the arrest of Mr. Bustillos and litigated the qualified immunity issues on that basis. In addition to determining that Corporal Bailey did not have reasonable suspicion, the 10th Circuit concluded that Corporal Bailey violated clearly established law by arresting Mr. Bustillos without probable cause, and ultimately denied him qualified immunity for both the Fourth and First Amendment claims. The case was returned to the district court, and as of the date of writing this episode, the lawsuit is still pending, with a jury trial scheduled to begin on October 21st, 2024. Overall, Corporal Sanchez and Corporal Bailey get an F for maintaining a hostile and condescending demeanor throughout the encounter, demonstrating a fundamental misunderstanding of the requirements of the Fourth Amendment and stop and identify laws, and wrongfully arresting Mr. Bustillos without any probable cause to do so. When Mr. Bustillos tried to explain to Corporal Bailey that he needed reasonable suspicion of an underlying crime in order to require him to identify himself, Corporal Bailey adamantly and repeatedly disagreed with him, even admitting later that he believed he was within his authority to identify Mr. Bustillos simply because he was responding to a call. This level of ignorance of core constitutional principles and the basic requirements of New Mexico law is unacceptable in a law enforcement officer. And given Corporal Bailey's admission regarding his incorrect understanding of the extent of his authority, I am fairly confident that, at least prior to this encounter, Corporal Bailey regularly required identification from individuals whenever he responded to a call for service, regardless of whether or not reasonable suspicion of a crime existed. As this encounter illustrates, when police officers do not understand the laws they are responsible for upholding, they can easily violate the law themselves and infringe on the constitutional rights of citizens who have a better understanding of the law than they do. Mr. Bustillos gets an A, because although he demonstrated some confusion about whether the DHS memos applied to the Navajo oil refinery and the correlation between utility structures and public property, he remained respectful but steadfast in his attempts to assert his constitutional rights, refused to identify himself when he was not legally required to do so, and took appropriate and dedicated legal action after the encounter. According to Corporal Bailey's own deposition, at the time that he arrested Mr. Bustillos, he believed that he was well within his authority to demand identification whenever he was dispatched to a call for service, despite the long-standing legal precedent requiring reasonable suspicion in order to demand an identification, and that it was only through conducting research in preparation for Mr. Bustillos' trial that he learned that reasonable suspicion of a crime was a requirement for an officer to order an individual to identify themselves. This demonstrates the substantial impact that citizens challenging police misconduct in the courtroom can have, not only by obtaining justice, but also so by educating misinformed officers and hopefully preventing them from engaging in future constitutional violations. Let us know if there's an interaction or legal topic that you would like us to discuss in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out my second channel for even more police interaction content.